Hey everybody, Michael Snyder, Pacific Northwest Weather Watch. Today is February 22nd. Right now we are looking at the infrared satellite imagery. Look at this atmospheric river extending all the way back north of the Hawaiian Islands, well across the Pacific Ocean. This is the storm train we've been talking about, and it is now at our doorstep. We have windstorm potential associated with this as well. Some very heavy rainfall and some flooding concerns. We'll dive into all those details as we go through the video here this morning and kind of just rounding up the Pacific Northwest here, hydrologic concerns. In quite a few areas, flood watches are in effect right now as well. And if we look closer to Seattle, the flood watch, we've got avalanche warnings here. We'll look at more of that in a bit here in a moment. But also just want to remind everybody, most flood fatalities occur in vehicles. It doesn't take much to sweep your car off the road. And once you go off the road, your car tumbles, water starts flowing in. So, turn around, don't drown. You guys know the drill. Here's Spokane, talk about the rises on small streams and rivers, especially once you get away from the Columbia Basin and across some of the higher terrain. And there's still some frozen ground out there. It's going to help exacerbate some of the runoff. And then we have the snowmelt ongoing as well. This is for off into Montana, I believe. This is Billings, Montana. This is kind of be what's in place across a lot of Idaho, Montana, some eastern Oregon as well. There's still the frozen ground out there, and they do talk about the snowmelt as well. Now, if you guys want a nice affordable weather station, click on that link down below to save 10% off. All solar powered, great smartphone app. Highly recommended. You will not regret it. Now, looking at last night, we're looking at 500 millibars or 18,000 feet. So here's the Pacific Northwest up here, of course, Hawaiian Islands, bottom left. This is what's steering this atmospheric river, this big axis, this huge trough out over the Gulf of Alaska, some ridging across the southwest USA. The warm, moist southwest flow pointed in towards Pacific Northwest. We bring this system in here, actually may bring a little bit of a surprise, blustery, gusty conditions here as we go through Sunday afternoon and evening. But the big one looms out here, and you might heard some chatter about this on social media. This is the strongest storm of the bunch, and this will be rolling in on the day Monday. You can kind of see it swinging through here right there. Now, this is just the European ensemble mean and the GFS ensemble mean, but right now models are in good agreement with the very powerful storm approaching the coastline. What is going to happen after that? Still in some question. We'll try to address a bit of that here in a moment. Now, if we take a look all the way back across the Pacific, you got Japan, you got the Hawaiian Islands. Look at this atmospheric river. That's what's bringing us our heavy rainfall, the very warm conditions aloft, the snow melt, and the flooding concerns. Then the spin up here happens, and you can see that very deep low right off the coastline on the 12Z. GFS, this is hot off the press, spinning right off the Washington coast. They're bringing some very strong winds for the coastal areas. How strong will the winds get across the interior areas? That is the big question. I mean, that's where millions of people live here, and everybody wants to know. But let's track this back a little bit. Let's go all the way back and see if we can identify this wave this morning. You can still see it is still well south of the Aleutian Islands out there. So we're watching this area of development there, and that's what's going to bring us our windstorm. Kind of fun that we can watch that here on the precipitable water loop. Now, looking at the GFS, this one is hot off the presses 12Z run. Let's put this into motion. You can see the rainfall just battering the area. There will be some snow, but just for the highest peaks out there for the most part. Tiny bit of a break as we go through Monday morning before this next system is just absolutely wrapping up off our coastline. Again, a very deep low. Look at this pressure gradient approaching the Washington, Oregon coast and portions of Vancouver Island under the gun a bit as well. Now, the issue here is that although this is a very powerful storm, it is starting to fill by the time it gets towards the coastline, and it slows down. And this generally does not bring the biggest blows to the interior areas. The models continue to show some of these high winds getting to the interior, but I'm still quite skeptical on that potential. You notice that it does fill quite a bit as we go on into Tuesday morning and finally kick across the region. So we still are not quite sure. This is not the big 30-year windstorm coming ripping across the region, but it still could be a significant storm, especially for some of the coastal areas. Now, thinking of taking that into account, we're going to take a look at the European ensemble as of last night, 06Z run, individual member mean sea level pressure contours. And you can see we've got 50 of these lines. Well, you probably can't see that, but there's 50 of these lines, and you can see different sea level pressures there, 980 to 990. The blue up there is 970 to 980. So as we go through Sunday, we're going to get a bit of a gusty storm from that one Sunday night, and then you can see the stronger storm approach. But you can still see some of the ensemble disagreement, although there will be a strong storm off the coast. We don't know the exact position and the exact track that it will take just yet. So that is still the question as of right now. And this is what your mind should look like if somebody says, "Hey, where's this low going to track? How windy am I going to get at my house?" This is what your mind should look like when you're trying to answer those questions. Still uncertainty, and that's why they call this a spaghetti plot, because you can see these noodles getting strewn out all over this graph or image. Now, looking at the GFS here. So this is 80-meter wind speed. So as we go through the day today, notice the winds are going to be fairly blustery along the coast, northwest interior, Strait of Georgia, kind of typical areas there. And we do get a bit of some blustery winds here that continue across the Oregon coast. Now, as we go on in through Sunday and Sunday night, we're going to have another system pass through here. It shows some pretty decent gusts coming up, some of the Puget Sound, but that is not the big windstorm. You can also see the southwesterly winds across eastern Washington, eastern Oregon. Again, this is starting Sunday late evening and nighttime as these winds are moving across. Now we wait for the big one to show up, and there it goes. You can see the winds get very strong along the Oregon coast. Put that into motion and continue on into the day Monday. Look at this bent back occlusion. We really got to watch this, because once these bent back occlusions dive inland, these can cause forest blowdowns into the coastal range of Oregon and Washington, again, depending on just the exact track of the storm system. So it can cause extensive tree damage and whatnot. This is a very powerful storm, and as you can see, very strong winds right off our coastline here, pushing into the Oregon-Washington coast. And then we go on in through Monday night, and look at this. These are sustained 80-meter wind speeds here towards 70 knots. That is hurricane force winds sustained right off the coastline there. So again, very intense winds possible for some of the coastal areas. Then we go on in through Monday night into Tuesday morning, and you can see the big surge start up the Puget Sound, and then you get the southeast winds across some of the northwest interior. You'd get big winds up the Willamette Valley as well. But you notice the low has slowed down, and it is now filling. So I'm a little bit skeptical on how strong these winds would still be across the Seattle Metro or the Portland Metro under this scenario. I'm going to need to be convinced a little bit more on that with that storm system, because it is weakening as it makes landfall. Now, if we take a look at last night's European, this is kind of the same thing I showed you with the spaghetti plot, but again, you can kind of see the clustering of the lows has gotten better. We are getting improved confidence that the storm is coming for our coastline. How much of that wind will hit Seattle and Portland, for example, is still much in question. And I'll show you some of the differences here, because we'll go back into the past. 1993, this is over 30 years ago now. I was actually going to college when this hit, and it canceled all my classes and dropped a whole bunch of trees around the campus as well. But you can see that this low pressure system here, one of the great windstorms of all time to strike the Pacific Northwest, or at least Western Washington. Look at that low track. You notice how that low dives inland? And look at that pressure gradient that sets up between Seattle and Portland. The low that we're dealing with is further off here. It is not a favorable gradient as a big storm like the inaugural day storm. So that's why I do not think we are headed for some huge epic region-wide windstorm that you're going to remember 50 years from now. So, but we still have to watch it. It can still cause damage, and you have trees down and things like that, and disrupting people's lives, and people can still be killed even in much weaker storms than what the inaugural day storm winds brought. So again, there's the differences between the inaugural day storm, which just took this really perfect track, kind of an archetype here for a Puget Sound windstorm right up across the region, even though it was slightly weakening as it made landfall. Still that pressure gradient very intense. So if we compare that now one more time here to just kind of keep you down to earth, there goes the GFS. Again, it's not that, it's just a very similar strength storm, but it is further out, and you don't get the massive damaging pressure gradient up across the interior areas. You notice by the time it starts to pivot inland, it is weakened quite dramatically, but it is the point where we have to watch it. Now, also, on that note, let me back up here a bit, because I do want to show you something else. We're going to go ahead and dive into surface wind and 80-meter wind speed, but wind gusts. We're going to go to Pacific Northwest. And I do want to show you, though, some of the wind speeds for the interior area underneath the scenario with the GFS at 12Z run. So here we go on the day Monday. You see the winds picking up over 50 for the Willamette Valley. So yeah, it is something we do have to watch. And the bent back occlusion moves in towards the Oregon-Washington coast, potential gusts 75, maybe even higher out on the coast. And then look at that, 55 for Seattle. Now the problem is that would start to cause damage. 55 Tacoma, Olympia, and some of the European runs have had some pretty big wind gusts as well. So that could be problematic. But again, I am skeptical, and I'll need to see more data on the day today before I start believing this. Now, let's take a look at the flooding potential here so we don't get lost on that. And we take a look as we go on in through This is about Sunday evening, and the GFS has finally come around. It stopped showing those 2.5-inch 24-hour totals for Seattle anyway, but still some pretty hefty amounts coming Seattle, South, Tacoma, Olympia, Southwest Washington, Willamette Valley, Coastal Range. We are under the gun for some flooding conditions, and like I've been mentioning the past few days, very warm conditions aloft. Snowmelt will be occurring. Some of the lower passes are just going to get nothing but rainfall during this event. And then we scroll on in through here, and then we got that next additional storm rolling through Monday as well. It's going to be dumping some precipitation with it also. And then finally we start to get a break as we go through the mid portion of next week, but a long way to go before we get there. And the 06Z European, you can see it does show, I think, what is that, 53, 55, something like that for the Seattle Metro. But you'll notice it doesn't have great ensemble agreement for the Seattle Metro on the wind speeds there, although it does show some pretty damaging gusts in some of the ensemble members. So we're still looking for better agreement there. Astoria Regional Airport, a little bit of a different scenario for the coastal areas. You see 60 showing up. That could be problematic. Look at Bowerman, Hoquiam, Washington, 73 on the latest control. And again, much better ensemble agreement on a fairly strong windstorm rolling up there. Same thing for Quileute, showing gusts mid-upper 60s. And yeah, so it could be a wild time there on Monday. We'll just continue to watch it. But I may do another video today because I want to see the 12 and the 18Z European data before I start to get, start to sound any alarms on the storm system. Now, this is for today, excessive rainfall outlook. That doesn't include the Seattle Metro, but it's pretty close. And the Cascades, I know people out and about traveling Oregon, Washington coast. But look at day 2. They have upgraded us to slight with just so much rainfall and the high snow levels. They pretty much had no option but to do so. Coastal Range, Olympics, and some of the central and southern Cascades of Washington. And day 3 as well, we're still under that slight risk there also. So again, turn around, don't drown, be ready for the very heavy rainfall. And here we go, Mount Hood. There's the atmospheric river rolling through. And then we build the ridging here maybe towards the end of next week. And you can see things warm up fairly dramatically there as well. But that won't be accompanied by huge amounts of rainfall. Now, Mount Baker, something similar there as well as we go on into next week. We start to warm up aloft. But again, this is the atmospheric river out here to the left of this graphic. Now, 6 to 10 day above normal. I believe this was updated yesterday. There's a 6 to 10 day. We do start to dry out a bit here once we make it through our storm train. But look at this. We've got the flashing red. So if we click on that, avalanche warning is in effect. And if we go ahead and look at that, they do talk about some very interesting stuff. High, middle, lower, and upper elevations out there. Avoid travel on and below all avalanche terrain, even the runouts of big slopes and terrain way above you. Very dangerous conditions are expected to develop through the day. Heavy wet snow and rainfall over a dry snowpack, high danger, and large natural avalanches are expected to continue on in through Sunday morning. So if you're going out and about across the higher terrain, pay attention, please. And I mean, they're so detailed. These scientists are so amazing. And, the people working at the Avalanche Center are so good. So just a reminder here, when we cut back on federal workers, you're cutting back on this kind of information and even storing the information itself. Now, taking a look here, percent of average precipitation, I'm going to update that to see where we are now. And again, not too much of a change. We'll be looking at that. We're almost to the end of meteorological winter coming up here. And there's a temperature departure from average, kind of a mixed bag here across Pacific Northwest. In a La Nina year, I was hoping that we would be more below normal, but there it is. But yeah, here we go. Storm train coming up. I'm going to be doing probably almost certainly another video here today because I've showed you some, pretty interesting wind speeds across the interior. And again, I'm very skeptical on the track at that low. It's slowing down. It is not the perfect track for a big region-wide windstorm. You need a faster moving low with a stronger gradient into the interior areas to get those very damaging winds. So anyway, we will check back then. What else? Hope you guys are having a good day otherwise, and I will talk to you guys later today.